Ready?
Ready.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm pleased to present my second bill, AB 1711, which seeks to increase access for Californians at our University of California system. As you probably know, it's been a growing trend for the UC system to enroll more out-of-state international students, non-residents, frankly, at the expense of California students. This started in the last 5-10 years during the budget crunch, and frankly, during those times, I think it was appropriate. The UC system had to do anything to keep the lights on. But I think going forward, as we've stabilized the UC system, this sets a fair policy going forward to make sure we don't ration access to our higher education segment, the University of California. Last year, our budget process recognized this issue and increased funding for the UC for 5,000 more California students and providing funding to do so in partnership with the UC. However, this past year, we realized that UC actually admitted fewer first-time California residents at the UC system by 1,600 students, at the same time increasing out-of-state residents by about 4,700 students. And as you kind of see by the chart, since 2007, over the last 9 years, actually, California freshmen, there are fewer Californians in the UC system entering as a freshman 2015, 2% decrease, whereas non-resident students have increased 335%. So the notion that non-resident students helps increase access for California students, the math just doesn't add up. And so we're setting forward a policy here that frankly isn't a new one. As the agenda states, in 2010, the regents even agendized setting a cap of a 10% policy for non-resident students. Now we're up at about 15.5% system-wide. As you see in your analysis, some of the top campuses are north of 20% as far as non-resident students. So we're setting a policy that would set aside a 15.5% camp UC-wide. There are some clarifications I just want to point out, and we'll get there probably in the witnesses testifying in opposition. It's our intention that this would set a statewide policy for the UC system, and that existing UC campuses would not have to decrease enrollment. In other words, UCLA, UC Berkeley, and UC San Diego, they wouldn't have to decrease enrollment, but they have to stay at a 15% system-wide camp. And we'll talk about later, I am very open to setting a policy in the bill which would allow some of the campuses at the lower end of non-resident, Riverside, Merced, Santa Barbara, Davis, and Irvine, to potentially grow, because they haven't been able to achieve the same type of success that the four marquee campuses have in the University of California system. So I think this is a fair approach that focuses on increasing access for Californians. I do have a parent here from the UC system whose kids went to higher education who would like to share a few words as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Michael. My family moved here in 1966. The reason that the five Michaels moved to Sacramento is because my father actually was an employee of the UC system. And 3 years later, after that, he became vice president. I am a graduate of UC Davis. My brother is a graduate of Cal. My sister is a graduate of UC Santa Barbara. And my father, in fact, went to Cal and UCLA for a master's degree. And so I hope that convinces you that I have blue and gold running through my blood.
And you're wearing it today.
Indeed, I am, sir. Thank you for noticing. I own a small property management firm in town and have for 27 years. And so we have one of our sons graduated from Jesuit High School in 2013. Jesuit High School is one of Sacramento's strongest regional high schools, and he had a 3.5 GPA, applied to UC Davis, San Diego, and Santa Barbara, and got into none of them. His ACT scores were commensurate with a 3.5. He did, however, get into the University of Washington, which, as I'm sure you know, is a top-tier university. And so for that, we are paying $11,000 $300 per quarter in tuition alone. We had saved in our 529 fund for a UC education, and so the adjustment has been very difficult for us. It's a big difference to make up, and we're not happy about it. In fact, I'm very upset with UC about this difficult pendulum swinging the wrong way. In my case, 3 generations of Michaels have supported and funded UC. The same is true with my wife's family. And then when it's time for our son to go to a UC, there's no room. This is on the heels of the UC president going to China to recruit their students to come here to take the California kids' spaces. And I would remind you, this is about freshmen and a baccalaureate degrees. In my view, graduate programs are another kettle of fish. This has nothing to do with graduate programs. So I can tell you that when I get calls now from UC Davis as an alumni, I'm not giving a dime. And neither are our friends who find themselves in the same situation. They're very upset. And if you think it's just the 59 and 60-year-olds that are upset, you would be wrong. It's the grandparents as well, because their grandchild was unable to go to UC in many cases. And so I am here to urge a strong aye vote for AB 1711, and I hope that you give it serious consideration.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support?
Hi, Jill Bryce with the California Federation of Teachers in Strong Support.
Any witnesses in opposition?
Chair and members, Nadia Leal Carrillo with the University of California, and we have a position of concern. We recognize the concerns related to the university's enrollment of non-residents, and I want to take this opportunity first to show and reiterate our commitment first to enroll more California residents. In fact, to the point that the author brought up about the under-enrollment that occurred this year, we are actually on track and prepared to enrolled an additional 6,600 students, California residents. The president has also capped non-resident at 3 campuses and has directed the remainder campuses to slow down the rate of their non-resident enrollment. However, we continue to be concerned because of and specifically to the cap proposed in the bill. We think that that's really going to hamper our ability to continue to provide a quality education. So for this reason, we urge you to continue to have in-depth discussions about ways that the university and the state can continue to partner to enroll more California residents and be that as part of your budget process. So we hope that we can continue to be a partner with you on this issue of mutual interest, and we look forward to working with the author as the bill moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Questions or comments from the members? Mr. Williams.
Well, I think that this is a really important problem that you are attempting to address, but I do think that it does not get at what the actual problem is. The actual problem is that the legislature and the governor massively cut UC and CSU funding, and yet we have sort of expected that there wouldn't be dramatic bad consequences for that cut, and really the inadequate level that even after the recession, when we restored some fundings, that has taken place. We have still not restored UC funding to pre-recession levels. It is still less than it was before the cuts. And last year was the first year that we actually gave any money for enrollment increases. So I appreciate the subcommittee chair, because he did try to get some Mr. McCarty as a member of the subcommittee. I appreciate his role because he did try to get some funding for enrollment increases, and we were successful in doing that last year. But that's the first year. So we approved it basically right before July. They enroll students in August at UC Berkeley and in September on the other campuses. So I don't think it should be shocking to any of us that they weren't able to turn around a month later or 2 months later and implement the enrollment increase in its entirety. If you look at that chart, you'll notice that even after the cuts, they kept freshman enrollment relatively constant. You can't do that without money. Every UC student pays about $12,000 if they don't get financial aid, but costs us about $30,000, right, in total. So $18,000 after the $12,000. If they are a student on financial aid, then they cost us more like the whole $30,000. And it is impossible for us to maintain freshman enrollment when state funding is going down without them doing something else. In this case, they did something that is not great, but it is functional, which is to raise non-resident enrollment to subsidize that, because they pay more, right? And they're used to subsidize not just programs on campus, but for those of us that are concerned about low-income students, that money is put back in financial aid in the entire system. So not just the campuses that are high non-resident enrollment, but the money goes back for financial aid for everyone. If we really want to solve this, we'll give better than a 4% increase in this year's budget and solve it that way. That would be the real way to solve it. I think it would be fine. It would probably, the chair and Mr. McCarty did do important work on documenting which campuses and sort of an inequity between campuses. And I think we could probably address that if the author wanted to by capping it at one or two campuses, not at the entire system. If, God forbid, we have a recession next year or the year after, and we've capped how much non-resident enrollment they can do, that's going to hurt in-state student numbers, not help them. The UC is not a zero-sum game in how many seats it has. It's a zero-sum game in how much money is available to subsidize students. And so you're going after seats, but the real problem is money. On most of these campuses, they could grow if there was money, but there's not money. So I can't support it today. I look forward to the author hopefully looking at a more concise bill that targets the actual problem.
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a little bit of different take, although I agree with my colleague from Santa Barbara, that the real answer, the more substantive answer, would certainly be increasing funding for our CSU and UC campuses. And I believe the authors of the bill are also supportive of that effort. I know it's something several of us have worked on together. It's important to remember, we were chatting earlier, last year we were all claiming victory because we got 4% enrollment growth, right? 4% budget growth for our campuses, which was great compared to where we've been over the last several years. But if you look at K-12 or K-14, they've had over 50% budget growth in the last few years. And so we absolutely have to continue increasing the state investment in our public universities if we're going to enroll more students and if we're going to improve outcomes. But having said that, this problem highlighted in this chart existed before the devastating budget cuts began. It has been a long time now that our UCs and CSUs have been dramatically increasing the number of non-resident students. I know this firsthand. I'm a former CSU administrator. And one of the reasons for it makes sense, and I think you discussed this as well, is if we're capturing those non-resident students, theoretically they pay more, and we can capture that additional tuition in order to increase the number of slots for in-state students, which is great, but at some point that stops working. At some point you've gone so far, and now we have a 335% increase in non-resident students, that no longer pencils out. And the purpose of our CSUs and UCs at the end of the day is to give every California student who's eligible, who's worked really hard in their in their high school careers, that they would have a slot at a CSU or UC campus. That is not happening today. Thousands upon thousands of fully eligible students are being denied by our CSU and UC campuses. That is unacceptable. It is in part a budget issue that we do need to address, but that's not the entire issue. And I think if we couple increased state investment in our universities with a bill like this, we will go a long way to getting back to the master plan of higher education, the promise that every California student can get a top quality education at one of our public universities. So I am proud to support this bill. I would be honored to be a co-author if it moves forward today. Compliment you for carrying it, and I hope it moves forward.
Mr. Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. McCarty, for introducing this language, which has really stirred up a really important conversation, and a conversation in which I agree with both of the speakers that came before me, Mr. Williams and Ms. Olson. Every California student who qualifies for the CSU or the UC should have a space for them when they graduate from high school. That's just a fundamental belief that I have. But the points made by Mr. Williams about the issue being the money that we have for them to be there is completely true. And the next recession is coming. Our rainy day fund will not save us. And funding for our important institutions will continue to decline. And as we see with UC, what they have done is completely rational for any organization that has been starved of resources. And we've seen this actually over many years, not just the recession, where public investment in our institutions of higher education has gone down. And we need to reverse that. And we need to invest in our institutions of higher education again. That is the challenge for us as the legislature, to make that a priority in our budget, and which I would completely support. But I am concerned about the unintended consequence of shutting off funding for more students that are actually from California, from any of our campuses that may live in our community that want to go there. And so at this time, I'm not able to support the legislation. But thank you for stirring up this really important conversation.
Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Member McCarty. I echo the statements made eloquently by Ms. Olson. And want to say I've families come up to me in my district and say I'm telling my kids to not even apply to UC because there's no place for them, and it's very discouraging to hear that. And these are families who rose up to opportunity through going to UC. I went to Cal for law school. My husband went there for undergrad. We've had college counselors and high school counselors come to our office and visit with us time and again about how they are often discouraging students or trying to give them a very realistic point that regardless of your academic abilities, there may not be a place for you. And so I won't repeat the good statements that have been made. I think Mr. Williams is correct. This can't possibly be, and it isn't appropriate for this to be the only solution. We've got to look at this, both the funding, both the reforms that UC and CSU need to make, as well as this as essential items for addressing this issue. We have to do it collaboratively, and I think in a bipartisan way, and I would be honored to be added as a co-author. Is that something that is agreeable to you? To be added as a co-author.
Co-author. I'll get to that with Ms. Olson's question. Some others. At this point, Mr. Medina and I aren't taking co-authors, but we'll working on that down the road.
Well, I certainly hope you will, particularly joint leadership of the committee, bipartisan support, Mr. McCarty, for the legislation and the need for there to be a bipartisan unified solution on it. So we'll be happy to follow up with your office on that. I think it is it's important. This is a major issue for UC and CSU, and all the major issues that face this state should be addressed in a bipartisan manner, and look forward to working with you on this bill.
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find myself in agreement with Mr. Williams and Mr. Levine on this particular issue. And what I think it doesn't follow that if we were to reduce out-of-state enrollment, that we would then be able to increase in-state enrollment. In fact, revenue would drop, and I haven't seen anyone show provide a pro forma that says that somehow there would be sufficient money for enrollment to increase. So if our goal here is to increase enrollment, I'm just not convinced that this is the tool to do it. In fact, I think that by putting this kind of hard cap and reducing the flexibility of the segments could actually hamper their ability to provide additional slots. We saw in the last year, if I'm correct in the numbers, in-state student enrollment increased by several thousand slots. That clearly is a result of a number of things, including the increase of funds and the prodding and then some of this committee and others in the legislature in influencing the segments to increase that local California enrollment. I am very concerned that a hard cap of 15.5% will have the opposite impact that we're looking for here. And I just will add one other comment. I haven't seen a discussion of whether we actually have the authority to do this also, and I think that's an important question.
Mr. Chavez.
Appreciate all the comments made earlier, and it was all about, but all the comments have been talking about funding. Now, Mr. McCarty, as you know, in our hearing, we had a number of discussions here on this, and I've been pretty consistent in asking this one question, and that is, what is the, when you're looking at a university, what is the appropriate number of out-of-state residents to add the critical element of high-quality education you expect at a university? And for the members here, we'd ask this also of, let's say, universities like Harvard or Yale or other universities, what percent did they bring in to have out-of-state residents? So we've heard everything from 20 to 25% would be the right number to have a academic environment of the high quality we like to see. Because as we know, in a university, it's not just learning from your professors, it's learning from your students. So what do we want to have in this diverse environment, the best environment we could have for our students in the UC system? So, Kevin, Mr. McCarty, have you determined a number? Is that you came up with 15? Is it driven by economics, or is it being driven by the academic environment?
Well, as far as the numbers for diversity, I mean, California's universities are diverse, not all from immigrant students. There are Californians who have diversity as well, of course, their parents, or they could have been California residents after immigrating here as youngsters. But it really is to draw the line in the sand, because we were at 5%, then 7%. As Ms. Olson said, even before the recession hit, we started inching up. To what end? The University of California, on their own admission, in 2010, they wanted to have a policy of 10%. Now we're at 15%. So if we don't do anything, even with increased revenue, as Mr. Williams said, it is a budget piece too, but since 2012 when Prop 30 passed, we've increased funding 4 years in a row. They've increased student fees. Our state support to the UC has increased with the general fund, student fee revenues, and Cal Grant revenues, and they're still inching up every year. To what end? And so I think this really is about access to the University of California for Californians.
So if what I hear you saying, and correct me if I heard wrong, is that you just grabbed a number because you saw it moving up, and it's focused on finance. Is that correct?
The cap is based upon where they're at now. And it's not an arbitrary number. It's okay. They keep inching up every year. Today, we're at 15.5. So let's have the number right there. And really to address the concerns of the UC and what Mr. Bloom said, the intent of the bill, and we can clarify it in this committee or next one, is that we're not asking the campuses to decrease enrollment at those systems that are at 20-something%. And I categorically reject the notion this is going to hurt the university as far as money existing. They're not going to have to decrease have decrease in enrollments at those campuses, but it would have, for every at those campuses, for every non-resident that they admit, they would probably have to admit about 3 Californians to stay at that same ratio.
And as you know, in our hearings we had, the UC Merced has a significantly different number than UC Berkeley as far as out-of-state residents. And the other issue that came up out of the meeting in our hearing before, and the argument being, well, we have a diverse state and that brings diversity to the campus itself. That's confusing culture with race. And those are two different things. So somebody here obviously bringing the culture from Asia or Europe or South America, that it's not so much a race issue as a cultural issue, which is different. So until I hear an answer on what we want to do for the academic environment, to me, that's the central issue of the university. It's not a monetary issue. I'd agree with Mr. Williams that we just need to put more money into it if that's what it is. I'm more concerned about the quality of the education at our UCs. And since I haven't heard anybody give me some study, which is surprising to me because we've been asking this for 2 years now, what is the right number? I'm not willing to cap something at 15% just because that's where we are today. So I won't be supporting this.
Dr. Weber.
Yes, thank you for bringing the bill forward, and thanks to everyone for the conversation. I guess the issue for me always with things like this is that this is probably a very complex issue, having been at the university all my life. It feels like a complex issue about where the balance need to be and where it shouldn't be, and whether or not a number capping is an appropriate thing versus other kinds of philosophical discussions. I think last year we had the bill California First, which was a bill that ensured every kid in California who qualified for the University of California or CSU a slot. And then after that, you deal with the enrollment of other students, which seems probably what everybody's talking about, that you want every California kid to basically be able to go to the UC if they qualify for the UC or the CSU. And I'm not sure if this bill does it by putting a cap on it. It might, but I'm not sure if it does, because you can cap it and still not have more slots because you haven't made a philosophical or financial commitment to every child in California who works hard and who qualifies for these institutions to get into those institutions. And so it becomes a real complicated issue because it is an issue of what our basic philosophy is. It's an issue of our resources and how that balance is there, as well as the academic issue, because there are clear academic benefits of having foreign students in our campuses, non-residents, but particularly foreign students on our campuses because of what they bring academically and culturally to the campus, then a level of enrichment that is really important for students' complete education and for our students to really interact with the rest of the world. And that doesn't happen all the time. And you can see it when you on a campus that doesn't have a good mix of all kinds of students. Our kids have a tendency to see the world in very small ways. And when they are interacting with others, they have a tendency to broaden their horizon and really become world citizens, which is very important. And that's also why it's important for them to travel out of the country while they're there and so forth and so on. I want the conversation to continue, so I'm tempted to vote for it because I want the conversation to continue, because I think we haven't had enough of a conversation about this. That's number one. Number two, I'm not even sure if you have the authority to tell the UC anything, be very honest about it. So we're really just talking to CSU, which may not be the culprit in the room, because we don't have the authority to cap UC. We have begged them to cap their things. We beg them to do things, and they comply, and they work with us on some issues that they have in the last couple of years due to holding of the budget. But the reality is they are a separate entity. And so when we start talking about capping UC and having UC do things, you know, most of our bills are recommendations to the University of California. So really the question is this something designed for CSU? And many of our CSU campuses don't have a lot of out-of-state students. It's the more popular ones like San Diego State and San Francisco and a few others that actually have a large number of out-of-state students and benefit from that in terms of the money that they bring in. And we have that ongoing battle at San Diego State all the time because it's a very popular campus for a lot of students around the world who want to come. And it makes it difficult for the local students to enroll at San Diego State versus some of the others. But this is probably, and maybe I hope you can address this whether or not, because I think sometimes we pass things and then we get frustrated when it's all over because we thought we did something that we didn't do. And that was to try to cap the University of California, and we don't really have that authority. I don't think we do, and I've looked into it a little bit when we've tried to do other things. So maybe you can address that, Mr. McCarty, in terms of what our role would be if this were to pass. What would our role be in control of the UC campus? And I know we've struggled with it at the budget level and all other kinds of levels that are there, so I don't want us to believe that we've done something profound in this room, only to discover that we are not able to. We can only implement this with regards to the CSU system and not the University of California because of the state constitution. So it'd be interesting to know exactly what this would actually do for the UC campus that's there. And then and whether or not capping the 15 would actually, and I too wondered when I saw the 15.5, I thought, okay, what does that mean? I don't know how we arrived at 15.5. Is if we just took the average of where we are now and, okay, maybe we should be at 10 versus 15. I don't know whether you've had conversations about the actual number. But I know we have a crisis, and we're trying to find a way to basically make the campuses more desirable or open to all of our students who really qualify for it. And they used to do that, and they don't anymore, as our campuses have become more competitive, not only statewide, but nationally and internationally. It's very hard to cap the UCs and the Berkeleys and the UCSD and others that have these attractive curriculums and programs. So have you given any thought to why we're at 15 and what our real role is with regards to UC, whether or not this would really cap UC?
Sure. Well, I'll just talk about the main issue with UC and the constitutionality of it. Mm-hmm. True, they are autonomous in the state constitution, but as the bill is written, as it states in analysis, it's as a condition upon receipt of funds appropriated in the budget. So it's tied to the budget appropriation, and as Mr. Chavez mentioned, we're having this exact parallel conversation in the budget with the enrollment for the UC as well. And so we see that it's nice to have it as a parallel, conversation in state policy and having the legislature weigh in, but also talking about it in the budget. As far as the number,
does the budget mean that they would not get increased? That we would freeze their budget? We would give no money? I mean, what does that mean?
Basically, as a condition of receiving the state appropriation, the following conditions would apply. So, I don't know, like budget bill language that specifies how the UC appropriation would have to be allocated.
So we would not fund them?
We would, but we would say as we fund them, we expect you to have enrollment policies which are in accord with the following ratios for non-resident students and Californians.
Okay, but would that mean they wouldn't be funded then? That's what I'm asking, because in the past when we've had language like this, it was tied to an increase, or we didn't say we're not funding, your appropriations is dependent upon this, which means then you have no funding at all if they don't do the 15.5 and they do the 17.
Mr. McCarty, could I add, I'd like to add just a tangent to that, to that question, that in previous budget years, before we as legislators got here, the budget designated how much enrollment increase UC would have dependent on the budget. So as the budget came out,
correct,
it was specified in the budget how much enrollment growth there would be, and I believe it was California students, I believe, but that was shared with me by Mac Taylor, the legislative analyst. So in that, that would be something that we could go back to.
Yeah, correct. I don't want to all of a sudden do a sub-2 hearing here, but we used to have budget targets,
right,
and we'd specify in the Schwarzenegger administration, Department of Finance, got rid of those, and our goal is to bring those back. Okay. In addition, set aside a policy with a ratio of non-resident resident. And your bigger question is why 15? It is somewhat of an arbitrary number, but it's a number we're at today. Today, we're at 15.5% of the system is non-resident, out-of-state, New Yorkers, Nevadans, or international, and the other, 84.5% are Californians. And so the policy question is that the damage has been done, if you want to say. The UC had to do it. I acknowledge that. They had no other choice to turn the lights on but to do this. And so I guess this acknowledges that question. Is it, okay, when do we say enough is enough and we should have a policy going forward, that sets a fair standard?
Ms. Baker?
I think there have been some great questions raised today by our colleagues. I think the better it's good to have this as a policy bill and not just through the budget process, that we should set a policy. I think it should be in a bipartisan way. I think this is a good bill. I will hold off for now until we can work out the possibility of a bipartisan co-authorship that I know myself and Ms. Olson would like to do, and look forward to the other conversations that colleagues have that they've raised today.
Thank you. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be a little bit stronger than that. It is fascinating to me that we have a lack of interest in bipartisan support for a bill. It's the first time in my 6 years in the Assembly I've heard that expressed in a committee hearing. So I think I agree. I like the policy. I think it should be coupled with increased funding. I think that would make it a stronger policy. So I suggest we work on a bipartisan bill, those who are interested in the policy aspects of it, coupled with increased funding for the systems. I'll be abstaining.
Mr. Williams.
So, I just want to reiterate, I don't like the policy unless it's trumped by a lot more funding. Let's put this in context. We cut them by hundreds of millions of dollars. We asked them. We all, like half the people in this room, have asked them to give raises to their employees, myself included. They give employees raises, and yet we expect them to do it with higher wages, less money, and enroll more students. I mean, am I missing something here? Unless we be shocked by 15% percentage out of state students, that is not ideal to me. I think we should try to get that lower, but most higher institutions of higher education have much higher than that. That's low, right? Just go surf the internet on any private institution in the state or any out-of-state public institution, and you will find higher out-of-state numbers. And so I just feel like this is kind of like piling on, right? If we want enrollment increases, we should pay for enrollment increases. It's not that hard.
Mr. McCarty.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe close and respond to the issue that Mr. Williams and Mr. Bloom raised, that we could have another recession. That's correct. And I think that the committee analysis alluded to this issue and suggested that we have some type of a trigger in there, which basically would allow this policy to exist or to lift this condition if we had some major budget action that required us to take a second look. So I'm open to accepting that. I'm willing to work on language with committee staff that basically addresses that last comment in there. And then, this is a really nuanced and complicated issue. Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Yeah. And if you look at frankly, if you look at the UC system, there's 10 campuses. There's really 9. Because the 10th is one in Merced in your area, but the one in San Francisco is not undergraduate. It's a teaching hospital. So there's 9. So there are 3 that have really high out-of-state non-resident enrollment: Berkeley, UCLA, and San Diego. They're all north of 20%, 21, 23, and 24. The bottom 3, not saying they're the bottom 3 campuses, but nonetheless, Merced, Santa Cruz, and Riverside all have 3, 7, and 3, right? And so the middle, Irvine, Davis, and Santa Barbara, 16, 12, and 11, they're right about that 15. So those campuses really wouldn't really be affected by this 15 a little bit. UC Irvine's right there. Maybe Davis and Santa Barbara want to grow up a little bit to 15. So I think going forward, the chancellor or the president's already said, as you mentioned earlier in your testimony, we're capping it at the 3. We're saying no more. We've heard it loud and clear from our regents, from our community. We can't keep doing this. So it's really, what do you do with those middle campuses and the ones at the bottom end? So I think going forward, I'm very open to coming up with a policy that has, maybe a goal, but allows Merced and Santa Cruz and Riverside to grow and get some of this non-resident participation, and potentially those middle campuses to grow as well. And with the 3 that are already at that level, specify that they wouldn't lose any current enrollment funding, that they wouldn't have to decrease below their current 24, 21, 23, and 24 respectively, and clarify that they could enroll more non-residents at that same ratio, but they'd have to stick at that ratio. So for every one non-resident, an equal number of 3 or so Californians. And so with that, I hope that answers the questions and issues, and certainly ask for your aye vote. And Mr. Medina and I talked about this. We don't want to commit to taking any co-authors today at the.
I wanted to ask you, Mr. McCarthy, if you would not, or if you would, keeping in mind that we want to see the legislation moving forward, your bill moving forward, I wanted to give you an opportunity to add co-authors at this time, keeping in mind that we want to see the bill moving forward.
Okay.
So you're the author.
You're the joint author.
But you're the principal author. So my question to you is if you would be open to, at this point, for co-authors. And keeping in mind that we'd like to see the bill move forward.
Could I move it right now as is, and then we'll see how it goes?
Yeah, we haven't taken a vote yet.
Yes.
Right, we don't have a motion yet. I have comments, and then maybe I'll ask my question again. Motion, Mr. Lowe. Second, Ms. Irwin. Second by Ms. Irwin. I'm sorry that the students of Poly High School had to leave. Poly High School was the high school where I taught for 20 years. They were here in the audience, and they met with me this morning, as did students, high school seniors from Valverde Unified. 2 groups of students. And my own Poly High School students, I would say, shared with Mr. Michael their concern. Their concern on how difficult it is to be accepted by UC today. And I shared with them that the legislation that we did last year and the condition that we put on UC with the $25 million in extra funding, that UC would now be accepting 5,000, now up to 6,600, makes it a good time to be a high school senior looking to UC acceptance. But I share Mr. Michael's frustration. I was a UC graduate myself. My brother was a graduate of Bolt Hall, but it's become more difficult. But I think that the discussion that we've had here has been the best discussion that I've heard in the 3 years that I've been here for the need for more funding for UC. I understand and agree with Mr. Williams that we cannot at the same time, and I've been saying that for a while, complain about the outcomes but not do anything different on funding. But I'm concerned. I'm concerned where we are now. I'm concerned that UC, we gave them that requirement, and then maybe they didn't have enough time, but they didn't move in the right direction. So therefore, Mr. McCarty and I shared the deep concern about the direction we're going. So my recommendation is support. I will vote in favor, but I want to give Mr. McCarty another opportunity to think about whether he wants to open it up for co-authors.
Yeah. At this time, I will move the bill as written, and as potentially with the suggestion if the staff wants to help with the trigger in the budget crisis type situation, and go with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we had a motion by Mr. Lowe, a second by Ms. Irwin. Madam Secretary, if you'd call the roll.
Medina.
Aye.
Medina, aye. Baker. Baker not voting. Bloom. Bloom not voting. Chavez. No. Chavez no. Irwin. Irwin aye. Jones Sawyer. Aye. Jones Sawyer aye. Levine. Not voting. Levine not voting. Linder. Not voting. Linder not voting. Lowe. Aye. Lowe aye. Olson. Santiago. Weber.
I wanted to go forward the conversation, so I'll vote aye.
Weber aye. Williams.
No.
Williams no. 5-2.
Okay, we'll keep it open. The vote is 5-2. The measure is not out. We will keep the roll open.
Okay.